Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see everybody. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to let people slowly trickle in. So my name is Brenda, and so tonight we have our event. If we don't know what's real, how can we resist? Freedom, Buddhism, and the Matrix. And I'm really excited for this discussion tonight. I watched The Matrix a lot as a child, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what other people's thoughts on this are. And just a little bit of an introduction of how this event came about, like what are we doing here? So this event is hosted by Dharma Realm Buddhist University, or DRBU. It's this small liberal arts university that's based in the broad Buddhist tradition. And those are like kind of, words, categories that we can use to describe what it is. But I think in a way that makes more sense for me is that it's a community of individuals that are really seriously considering what this human existence is and who deeply question how to live, what is this life thing, what is this reality thing. And it's people who are really willing to go to the depths and to the edge of these questions and aren't satisfied with easy answers and just are really committed to looking at these questions that gnaw at them. So I hope that this evening you get a little bit of a flavor of how we approach things. Usually at DRBU, we're reading all these different texts, and we thought, well, what if we kind of apply this approach to a film? And we're interested in doing this in other kind of cultural items. So tonight we have here Professor Doug Powers. He's been teaching for decades, and he currently teaches Buddhism and philosophy at DRBU. And I think he's really devoted his life to seeing how Buddhism and Western philosophy can be applied to the modern mind and the contemporary human experience. We also have Li Jiao here, and Omar and myself will be helping move the conversation along. And just like to give a brief overview of what this evening will be like, we'll be showing some clips from the first Matrix movie and then a couple clips from the most recent Matrix movie. So there might be a spoiler alert if you guys haven't seen it yet, just a warning. And as we show the clips, we really encourage you to make comments in the chat box, ask questions along the way, and we'll try and incorporate them as best as we can. And then we've saved time at the end for a more general kind of Q&A discussion. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what all of you guys think about this topic. I mean, I think anybody who watches The Matrix and has interest in Buddhism really sees there's a lot of resonance with what, like, the journey that the main character Neo goes through, and maybe your own experience on the spiritual path. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We will be recording it, so I think Zoom probably already notified you of that. We're also live streaming this on YouTube, and we'll put that link in the chat box in case you want to share it with somebody. And I think that's it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Omar, who's going to take us through the first video clip.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. Just to get the conversation started, I thought I would start by maybe talking about a clip from the first movie, from the first Matrix movie, which is, I just thought it's a really good introduction to the whole premise of the movies. So maybe we can show the clip now, and then later we can kind of start the conversation around that.
Why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix?
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Oh, Doug, I guess the reason I picked this clip is because it has just so many themes. But the two things that I was wondering if you could make a comment on are just first, this whole idea that the world, at least in the movie, the world that we perceive ordinarily, the thing that we think is normal life, is actually not what is really going on. And also, I was very intrigued by this comment that that Morpheus tells Neo. He tells him, like, you kind of already know this. It's like there's like a splinter in your mind, like this maybe sense of existential questioning that the movie plays off of. And that's the reason why Neo kind of starts this journey, is because there's already something inside of him that tells him that this just cannot be it. There has to be something to this. So I was just wondering if you could comment on those two things, and how do you see that relating to the kind of the Buddhist perspective?
Well, I'm really glad to have an opportunity to see one of our recruiters, the DRBU recruiters. Morpheus is one of our recruiters. That is actually exactly how we recruit students. We ask them to take the pill, you know, and they can decide one or the other. So anyway, yeah, I mean, the great thing about this is it introduces a kind of view that we're very comfortable with in Buddha's insight of what's going on. He calls this the conditioned world. And we live in a conditioned world that isn't exactly, we can never experience it directly. We experience it through through our imagination of it, through our creation of something in it. Now, the fortunate thing is, whereas the movie The Matrix puts the causality outside the person, the great thing about Buddhism, although we have the same dynamic of a conditioning world that if you buy into, you're a slave, you're in a set of karmic habits, there's no way out, there's no freedom. As long as you're caught up in that habituation, there's no way out. So you have to find your way out in some kind of way through meditation, or where we can go into different techniques of how you try to come to a realization so you can see your way through the conditioned world. But the great thing that's different about Buddhism than the way the Matrix lays it out is it puts, there's a lot of emphasis on the Matrix and that it's happening to you. And the great thing about Buddhism is that this reality, this distorted reality that you find yourself in, is actually of your own creation through your distortion of your experiences, and then being attached to the emotions and thoughts that come about from your own creation. So you can actually find your way out because you actually constructed it. The second thing that you're mentioning is that, I think a major emphasis of Buddhism is that I think all of our students and everybody that's ever gotten into Buddhism had this sense that things aren't quite right. There's something I'm missing. I don't know what's going on, but I know I'm missing something. And so most other approaches, when they feel like something's missing, start looking for an ideology, an answer, a deity or something. Buddhism, the Buddha pointed out that the only answer that you could find that you're feeling a lack of is within your own awareness, deep within your own awareness, going deeply in your own awareness. There's a freedom in your own awareness that you could open up, that you could actually see what's going on, both in both the process of your own experience and this conditional world that you're in. So the Buddha said that everyone has this Buddha nature, and everyone's feeling a certain amount of disease and not having, not have gone through some sort of process to get in contact with that Buddha nature, or Bodhi, as it says. So the general outline of this is very Buddhist, but the way the Buddhist would approach the issues that he's presented us with would be quite different.
So I guess what you're saying is that there is a similarity there in that the world we're experiencing is a kind of construction. But of course, in Buddhism, I don't think we have this idea that the machines kind of control us. The machines created this, but actually I was very intrigued by that. We just said that it's actually us who are building our own prison. And also, so I think in the movie it's quite dramatic. Like he says, like the movie is quite dramatic, the difference between being inside the matrix and everything you think is going on. And I think I can definitely relate to this sense of disease, like, okay, there's something not quite right. But is it as dramatic as like the whole reality is actually not true? Is it like that dramatic?
Well, it's probably more dramatic than that. It's probably more dramatic than that, because from the Buddhist insight, everything that's going on is something that we've imagined, we've interpreted what's going on. So we're having experiences through the senses, and at every moment we're interpreting those experiences. And in the process of interpreting it and then remembering them in thoughts and feelings and so forth, we're actually constructing our own universe of experience that we're living in. And then we create we hold on to a certain number of the views and emotions and so forth. And then we consider that to be who we are. And then we protect that. We spend all of our time being resentful that isn't being appreciated. So the resentful of ourselves not being appreciated is an almost third level construct. So it's actually worse in terms of how fantasy-like and imagined the world that each of us live in is. However, as I said, it's because it's a construction that we're involved in, it's not a conspiracy against us. And the Matrix has a little bit of a conspiratorial and that plays into a kind of paranoia that a lot of people have, that they're, like rigged elections and so forth, that they're in some kind of, or the economic system rigged against me, that everybody's looking for some sort of group they can join, that they're a victim, that they can join together as a victim of some other kind of conspiratory aspect. And the problem with that, as not just that Buddha pointed out, but going all the way back into Nietzsche and Husserl, all the phenomenology, is that once we give the, once we give away the place where freedom and choice is ours at an ultimate level, at least to interpret, at the level of interpretation, if we give away the place of the freedom of interpretation as the primary place that we construct the world, then we're always in a deterministic world. We're always in a conspiratorial world. And once you've made that move, you already have, once you have given away that anything outside of yourself is more powerful than your own ability to have some freedom of decision about, then you've given away the place of absolute freedom from the very beginning. So although it lays out, I think the Matrix gives us a really good sense of how the world is totally constructed and we live in simulation. It has this kind of a kind of modern sense of conspiratory sort of, something out there is in control in some kind of way. And we may be able to understand it in some kind of way, but ultimately, where does it really suggest the freedom lies? What would you really be able to do from what's being presented in the Matrix to escape that construct? Since it is actually constructed, at least in the movie, from external elements of kind of conspiratory control,
So I guess what I hear you say is that in one sense it's worse because the delusion, it kind of involves this whole idea of having to protect myself and the whole suffering. But at the same time, it's also very optimistic in the sense that it's not something as has been done to me from outside, but because it's me who is constantly doing it, then the solution is also kind of within me. I don't have to go fight some machine or something.
Right. I mean, you might fight the machine later for justice or something, but until you've actually created the freedom of your own mind, you're trapped in the cycle of it until you have a certain amount of freedom. And what Buddha would point out is that actually most people just don't want that kind of freedom because they don't want that kind of responsibility. They want to blame, everybody's looking for someone else to blame because they don't want to be responsible for their own world that they've constructed, which I totally understand. So everybody can join their own victimized group and then they can feel really good together, finding who's like a conspiratory group against them. And everybody feels really good and really resentful, and we just kind of do what we're doing. So that's one approach. The Buddha would suggest a different approach. If you really want to free yourself, then you have to take full responsibility and freedom and observe. Meditation and all these techniques are learning how to observe where that process happens. Observing the process of how the formation of the karmic conditions that we take on, the thoughts and emotions and so forth that we create and have, how we actually go about creating those, and then how we go about holding on to those, and getting into a kind of disinterested observer, getting into ourselves as a disinterested observer that can actually observe how that whole mechanism of construction of the world and our own identity in that construction, how that actually comes about step by step by step by step. Because you have to see it directly in your mind how it comes about to free yourself from it. You can't free yourself until you can actually see it. But first of all, you have to understand that you're looking then for the place where you're constructing it. You're not looking for the place where someone else is controlling you or where you're a victim of something. If you're looking for that, you'll find that. If you're looking for where you're free, you'll find that.
So actually, I think this segues very nicely into our second clip, which is Brenda's because it's like the question of, okay, so we have these two things, but how can we actually distinguish what is what? And I think that's what Brenda was gonna talk about. So
Yeah, thanks, Omar. Yeah, so this next clip is from the most recent movie, and the main character Neo, he's escaped from the Matrix for the second time. Perhaps it happened again in the second and third movies, I don't remember, and he's talking to this other character, Bugs, about what he's going through and how he's reacting to the whole thing. So Li Jiao, you want to put on the second clip?
How am I doing? I don't know. I don't even know how to know.
That's it, isn't it? If we don't know what's real, you can't resist. They took your story, something that meant so much to people like me, and turned it into something trivial. It's what the Matrix does. It weaponizes every idea, every dream, everything that's important to us.
Yeah, I love this clip because I think it's such a natural progression from, like, if you do start to see through some things in your life and you're like, okay, these things aren't really quite doing it for me in the same way, or like this isn't the whole thing, but then you're in this position, at least I find, like, then how do I know what's right then? Because like what you thought was right, not only is what you thought was right no longer exactly right, like how you even knew that was right, like that type of reasoning, thinking, that also falls apart. So then I find myself like kind of like lost in a way, like just kind of out, and I don't have any, in a way, like I don't have any direction, and I don't even know how I would find a direction that I could trust, because my basis for what I trusted before has fallen apart along with it as well. And so I really relate to Neo in this scene. And I wonder, Doug, if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, again, if we look for the answer, if we try to look for the answer by analyzing, or we try to look for the answer within the relative constructs of values, the relative constructs of ideologies, the relative constructs of, what we call worldly analysis and knowledge, we'll always find contradiction. It's all constructed. We know from anything we've read in the last, 30, 40 years, everything's constructed with all kinds of intention, power intentions, ideological intentions. We can read, all the philosophers the last 40 years, and we can see all the different theoretical constructs of how, and this book you can see has obviously read Lacan and Foucault and, a lot of these theoreticians of the last 40 or 50 years is kind of grounded in that kind of way of thinking, Baudrillard and so forth. So if you read all of that and have a sense of culture and society that we live in, if you try to resolve something by the relativity inside of a culture, you'll always, at the end of the day, you always end up in just another truth that's competing against another truth, that's competing against another truth. And finally, you just believe something because you can't take it anymore. So most people just finally just get married, they just do something because they can't take it anymore. They see it. If they're really intelligent, they can see they're going down a rabbit hole, or something. But eventually they just bail, they just cave, and they just, okay. And then they just rationalize and justify. So you see this, okay, I'm going to go. Okay, I can't take it anymore. I just jump on something, then I rationalize and justify that for the next 40 years. And then I die, so they never want that life. So the only way, the only approach that you can have to this is you have to see that from, again, the Buddhist insight into this is as trying to understand your way out of what's an honest feeling, that a very honest and real feeling that what I'm living in is something that's made up and isn't what it seems to be. And I can't really create a life around what I've constructed, because the emotions are a roller coaster. The thoughts are moving around from place to place. The identity I am is constantly changing and getting different kinds of reactions from different people. It works and doesn't work and so forth. So it's very unstable. I mean, life is very unstable from that position. So the Buddha's insight into this is you'll never get anywhere going that way. The only possibility is you have to look into the decision making, that the awareness that's alive right now in this conversation in each of us. Look down in that awareness and bring that awareness to a kind of stillness or quietness or observing sort of confidence in a sort of an observing mind that can begin to observe all this mechanism happening internally, can actually see the mechanism happening. And if you can actually observe the mechanism happening, you'll actually see how the contradictions are actually constructed. Not theoretically, not as a belief, but directly see. Now, in order to do that, you have to have confidence in your own, that at some deeper level, there's a potential for a sort of awareness. I mean, this is called, in Buddhist terms, it's called prajna, or, a deeper level of awareness than simply knowledge. But the only way you could know that really existed is through direct experience yourself. There's no way that you can know that from outside. You can only know that from your own process and from your own efforts to work on developing that perspective. So unfortunately, you just can't take a red pill. You actually have to spend time working in the observing place of that. And then when you do that, you'll begin to see how all that's constructed. You'll see how the contradictions are constructed. You'll see how your desire, your fears, your confusions lead you to have emotions, ideas, and actions. And you can actually see how those emotions and actions lead to other actions. And you can actually observe your life, all the elements of your life, actually being constructed and acting out, and everything that's kind of going on in the drama of all this activity. But the only place that you can see that from is from the disinterested observer, from the observer that's actually can observe all this going on, all this activity.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I think this actually does kind of lead into the next clip pretty well, and is also some of what's going on in the chat box about seeing and thinking and feeling. I think that leads quite well into Li Jiao, your next clip. So maybe we can move on to that one.
Okay. I do think as maybe after that, we can talk about people's questions and comments. So the next clip really connects really well with what we're talking about. It's really during the movie, during the next part of the movie, the analyst kind of, plays the observing and role and describe the mechanism a bit more towards the dynamic between Neo and Trinity. So I'm going to show that movie, show that clip right now here.
I know, kind of ironic, using the power that defined you to control you. Did you know hope and despair are nearly identical in code? Alone, neither of you is of any particular value. Acids and bases, you're dangerous when mixed together. Every sim where you two bonded, let's just say bad things happened. However, as long as I managed to keep you close, but not too close, I discovered something incredible. Now, my predecessor loved precision. His matrix was all fussy facts and equations. He hated the human mind. So he never bothered to realize that you don't give a shit about facts. It's all about fiction. The only world that matters is the one in here. And you people believe the craziest shit. Why? What validates and makes your fictions real? Feelings. You ever wonder why you have nightmares? Why your own brain tortures you? It's actually us maximizing your output. It works just like this. Oh no, can you stop the bullet? If only you could move faster. Here's the thing about feelings. They're so much easier to control than facts. Turns out in my matrix, the worse we treat you, the more we manipulate you, the more energy you produce. It's nuts. I've been setting productivity records every year since I took over. And the best part, zero resistance. People stay in their pods, happier than pigs in shit. The key to it all? You and her, quietly yearning for what you don't have while dreading losing what you do. For 99.9% of your race, that is the definition of reality. Desire and fear, baby. Just give the people what they want, right? Please come here.
Is basically, I'm gonna mute, sorry. That is basically something that the dynamic between desire and fear, and then it's kind of like it's interesting because they talk about the power of hope and despair as well, as the analyst described, and then it kind of shows when there is the right distance between Neo and Trinity. It's interesting, it's like they almost become the object of desire for each other, for one another. And that allows the display of hope and despair to unfold and kind of further develop into narratives and sustain and drive the matrix. And I think that's relevant and that's very interesting as well to the modern society in a sense. It's kind of like the same mechanism of uncertain outcome that promotes kind of behavior that is kind of irrational. It's like every time we try to refresh and look at our social media, it's like, oh, do I get a new feed? Do I not get a new feed? What's the new thing that is going to promote to show it to me? Sometimes, so there's like we don't know what is going to happen, and because of that, it drives that willingness to pursue that, even though the reward might not even be as valuable. But then once we obtain the reward, just like what the analyst says, bad things happen. In the sense, once we already have what we want, or maybe on the other hand, if the distance is too great, and we'll never have the hope of obtaining what we want. In that sense, the matrix lose its charm, and we lose the drive to kind of perform for the matrix in that sense. So I don't know. What do you think, Doug?
Well, this is, I would say of all the clips we've seen, this is probably the most literally Buddhist. It has, many elements of almost a Shastra text, because the Buddha's insight was we're basically driven by lacking. The word desire is actually thirsting. It's not desire. It's not a Freudian desire. Desire comes later. Freudian desire comes after the lacking. The Buddha didn't say we desire in the libido way. He said we're lacking. So insofar as we're lacking, it's the energy of that lacking that drives every moment of our lives. And we're constantly doing everything to try to get attention, to get somebody's attention, to get the society's attention, to get to be fulfilled through, in some way or another, get that lacking fulfilled. So all of our behavior in early childhood, adolescence, and in through our lifetime is spent trying to deal with this, like trying to find objects of desire that fulfill the sense of lacking. So the Buddha said the only way that you ever stop the process of that is to go back into the formation of the self, of the mind heart experience in its early formations, and recognize that it's totally okay and complete within itself, that it doesn't lack anything, that the fundamental awareness that everyone's using right now to experience their lives with and through doesn't lack anything at all. It's completely fulfilled in itself. And until there's a confidence in the Bodhi, in a totally fulfilled awareness that has the freedom and the stillness and the observing power, and recognizes it has choice and observes the choice, sees the outcome of the choice, takes responsibility for the choice, doesn't do rationalization, justification, all these other different elements, people will never get past that sense of lacking that drives everything about their lives. And then from that, of course, I mean, I think it was really well done in putting male and female with a lot of energy between, a lot of erotic energy, that there's a perfect distance, too close and there's too far away, there's no energy. There's exactly the right place to keep that going, to keep the energy of that erotic energy going. And some sort of sense of fulfillment that will happen through matching up in some kind of way. And then, of course, it goes on to say that the way I control you is I know that you create your own fantasies, your own narrative of your lives from this. And you don't care about facts, you just care about your feelings. And again, that's a super insight into the current way of thinking. Again, that was a super modern, the fourth movie modernized the approach with that concept. In other words, that the primary place that many, many modern people take their references, their emotions, and their personal feelings because they don't trust anything else. And so he actually, in the movie, they were actually able to suggest that the entire matrix is able to control everyone from the actual place that they think they have the greatest awareness and the greatest freedom, which is their emotions. But the movie realizes what the Buddha realized all along was that we construct our own the emotions are something that is something that we experience our senses and have emotions that are constructed by ourselves. They are then remembered in the past, and in the present, the emotions come back by association. And so emotions are unstable, they're constructed, they're imagined, they're ours, they're something we've created from our internal process. And then more importantly, they aren't who we are. So not only have we constructed the emotions, but they aren't actually who we are. When we identify with emotions, then we're on a roller coaster of the flow of emotions. So the movie, I think, does quite a good job of pointing out that that the matrix, if we take the matrix to be the whole economic production, because there's a suggestion in there that it's keeping everybody, that this lacking is then turned into an entire, sort of, we could get into Luz and Guattari's Thousand Plateaus and capitalism, schizophrenia, and go back into all these writers that talked about the relationship between capitalism, psychology, Freudian libido, all these different things put together in interesting theoretical constructs. And you can see that you can construct a way of looking at the matrix as this whole drive towards productivity and the efficiency and identity through productivity that's being suggested here, that then once we're into the mode of that, we're completely lost in the entire value construct of that. And it's very hard to find our way back to the fundamental awareness of that. We kind of get lost in that whole experience. So, and then I control you through that you yearn for what you don't have and you're afraid of losing what you have. And that's essentially what's driving most people at a very, very deep level. And once they're not looking through the force of that, you could actually say that almost everybody that hasn't actually cultivated a little bit of freedom of mind is actually a completely predictable mechanism. Once all those elements, and I haven't gone through them in detail because it would take quite a while, but if we put all of those mechanisms that were suggested there together and you observed what you were doing with the force of those mechanisms, then you're basically a completely predictable mechanism. You may think you're not, but you're actually just a predictable mechanism because you have no space in the flow of the habituation between the force of these energies in the narrative and the identity that you picked up. So I think in this scene, the movie really catches a real sense of how actually most people do live in that mechanism at this point in time. So, and the way out of that, I mean, the movie doesn't actually give a way out of that, but I would suggest that as far as I can see, and having looked at quite a few aspects of this, that it really seems to me that Buddha's insights into this are actually one of the few ways that you could actually find your way out of this. Almost every way that you would try to go at it will not get you out of it because you'll get tied back up in a loop of it at some point in it. So.
Thanks, Doug. We have some questions piled up, so I thought now we could switch over to seeing a little bit of what everybody here is interested in. One question came up earlier about the Matrix, and there's kind of some other like related questions about can you say like the Matrix is, in the Buddhism, there's this term defilement. And then if there is also, then like how do you go about working with it? Do you kind of just, there's all these kind of ideas, I mean, these like kind of words of deconstructing it. Are you escaping it? Yeah, that's sort of a combo of a couple people's questions.
Did you want to say something about that, or Brenda?
Oh no, you can go ahead, Doug.
Angela, did you want to say something about that?
No, please go ahead.
I think the way the Matrix has this conspiratorial aspect to it makes it into a little bit more of a, I mean, it has a sense of conspiracy to it. But I think that, and so maybe in that sense, in those senses, but I would really say that the analogy is more what we would call the conditional. In Buddhism, what we call the conditional. And the conditional is the totality of the conditional at the realm of sentience. So it's very important to see that Buddhism doesn't see form as primarily, and this is something in the movie that is played with, but not because they use so much fighting and stuff. They lose an opportunity to show people another way in which the Matrix operates, which is not in the realm of form, but in the realm of thought and emotion, in the realm of what we call, the Buddhists would call sentience, thought, consciousness. And so the Buddha would say everything primarily is going on in the realm of awareness and consciousness. Form is just a secondary element of that. There is form, but it's just a secondary element of it. And the totality of all sentience and its interconnected web is the conditional. We're not going to talk about the location of that because that would get we'll get into a very complicated almost theological conversation there. But the conditional, we all find ourselves in the conditional. You're in a body, you're in a gender, you're in a culture, you're in all kinds of aspects. And as you find yourself, as you find your awareness, you find yourself in the conditional, in a set of conditions. It's not a conspiracy though. The Buddha believed that you ended up in those conditions from karmic conditions over a very long period of time. Let's not get into that either, because that goes past a single lifetime, which gets a little bit much for some people. But even in this lifetime, it's constructed from this lifetime. The actions we take, the thoughts we've had, the emotions, the action are part of the construction of that. And then in turn, as we interact with that, we make up an interpretation of it. So we're experiencing the conditional, and then in each moment of our experience, we make up our interpretation of it. We imagine an interpretation of it. Those imaginations are called emotions, thoughts, feelings. We could call them all different kinds of things. Dharma, I'm just not using, the kind of words that we use in Buddhist terms. They'd also be called dharmas or something. So those, and so as we construct those, so we're living in an imagined world in the conditional. And then the Buddha suggests that if you can cultivate, you could actually see what's going on. You could actually be in the real. You could actually enter the real, and the real would be being able to observe what's going on as it's really going on. Actually seeing the imagined for what it is, and actually seeing the conditional as it actually is at each moment experience. So the goal of Mahayana Buddhism is not to empty the mind and escape. There's many, many people these days that are meditating to escape reality. The Mahayana Chan meditation is not to escape, it's to develop an acute awareness of what's actually going on. And in order to do that, you have to suspend and get past the limitations of your own perspective. If you're trapped in your own perspectives, your own ideologies, your own point of view, you can't see anything but that. Everything is seen through the lens of your own experience. And if you're seeing things only through the lens of your own experience, then you can't use the mind in this direct way to see what's actually going on, in this prajna way of seeing. You can't. The mind has the capacity, and it's always actually there seeing everything as it really is, but you can't use that because the self, the lens of your opinions, your views, your resentments, your feeling of victimization is covering the play. Your emotional reactions to that are all covering your mind every moment. And you're just an endless, set of turbulations. So I would say that, if you look at it from that vantage point, I think the problem with as I said earlier in the movie, is it's always presenting the Matrix as something that's a kind of conspiratory, and what's actually going on in the Matrix that we all live within, is it's not a conspiracy. It's a collection of all of the sentiences and all the interaction of all those in a web of interaction and activity. And although there is all that going on, insofar as any of it becomes ours, we have to pay attention, give attention, imagine, make it up, bring it into our existence. There has to be, in every element that becomes important to us from that, there's an actual decision, intention, awareness on our part that both brings it to consciousness and holds it in consciousness and gives it enough attention and interest for it to become an important element of our existence. And there's choice and intention in that. It's not something that's just conspiratorial against it.
Lucia, did you want to mention something?
Yeah, maybe I'll add something as well, because what Doug mentioned in the beginning actually also reminded me of the three natures, right? There's the imagined nature of our experience, there is the conditioned nature of what's happening, and then there's the real. And I think in terms of defilement, my understanding is that is mostly the imaginary nature. Basically, when we're experiencing something through when condition is unfolding, and then we're creating stories on top of that and creating interpretation on top of that. It's kind of like there is a little bit of a distance from the condition and real, and that's why there's the imagined part, and that's, you know, driven by, again, back to the Matrix movie, driven by fear, driven by desire. And then that's always, I think Doug mentioned that, that's always in the past or in the future. So another way probably to come back, at least to observe and slowly get back to just observing the conditional, is to stay on the present moment. And that is definitely a practice that we can all try to do.
Thanks, Li Jiang. So there's a question from GF Daniel from YouTube, and also Marissa. I feel like they kind of related. So he says, is it possible that the disillusion is more dramatic in Buddhism compared to the Matrix because of the shock of how lost we are and how bad things are? And then Marissa asked kind of a similar question about how, so there's these elements that we've constructed and they've served us before, maybe as a coping mechanism, otherwise it wouldn't be there. Why do we construct it, and how do we cope after deconstructing it? So I think they're both kind of touching upon like maybe this shock, or how do we deal with things becoming deconstructed?
You want to say anything about that, Brenda? Don't you feel the shock of things being deconstructed? You can speak to that directly, right?
I think I'm still in it.
Yeah. Still in the shock of being just deconstructed.
It's been going on for like 5 years, I think. Maybe longer. I don't know.
Yeah, you have to have you know, things have to be bad enough. You know, in some ways you could say that how bad things are is good, because they have to get really bad for you to jump off the cliff to deconstruct to the degree that it's actually useful to be deconstructed. You know, you have to be at the edge. And in some ways, if you're just kind of drifting along, it's kind of half working, then you're not really motivated. But of course, at the beginning of this movie, we have from the very beginning, it's assumed that the primary characters in here are ready to take a pill, right? So we're already assuming that all the people that are going to head down the path of deconstruction, if we want to call it that, have come to the point that they just can't go on any longer kind of going about it in the way they are. Now, is it when you decide you're going to take the pill, so to speak, is it easy and is it always smooth? It isn't, but that's where basically the only approach you can possibly take is have a confidence in being patient and believing, and absolutely believing, that at some fundamental and profound level, your capacity of your own experience, the capacity of your own awareness that hasn't yet been fully realized, you have to have an absolute faith and confidence in that the awareness that you're using all the time has a capacity to understand, grasp, choose, intend, and have the freedom to observe and change. If you don't have that faith or confidence, and it's very audacious, I grant that it's very audacious, but if you don't have that audacious faith in that kind of sense of your deeper level self, then you won't be willing to stay at it long enough and be patient with it long enough to have a little bit of glimmer of a little bit of freedom and a little bit of actually moments where you do actually get it and observe it and see all those elements, see what's going on, see where it is that you make a choice to attend, see where emotions and thoughts only exist within your attention, And when you're not, the attention is not going to the emotion and thought, they have no life of their own. That all this going on in the mind only has the life that your attention brings to it. And as soon as you bring your attention away, it has no oxygen. It doesn't exist. And if you can just see that nothing that's going on has any oxygen unless your attention gives it the oxygen, you can just from that alone begin to see the freedom of the mind to begin to see that you don't necessarily have to go along with everything that's arising. You don't have to identify with emotions as who you are. You don't have to, there's a lot of things you can learn not to do. And as you do that, the space, there's sort of a mental space that gradually grows that has a greater amount of freedom of observation, and you become more confident with. It's a natural process. It just takes, and everybody has, one person's experience is not the same as another's because the amount of habituation that you've constructed is very different from one person to another. You can't compare your process to another person's process. You can talk about it in general, but the actual experience of it is going to be totally unique to each person. And all we can do for each other is we can support each other in the process. So the way to escape the actual answers to the final aspects of that movie, where the movie was building on the tension between the two people in their care and appreciation and love, their libido, that the tension of that created all these negative elements through using the energy of that. We could actually turn that around and use the energy of care, concern, and community to support each other in the process of their own realization of this deeper level of freedom and awareness. But it's exactly the opposite of what relationships usually are, which is based on need, desire, please take care of my lacking and I'll take care of your lacking. We'll make a contractual deal on mutual lacking, whatever. And you take out the garbage and I'll do the backyard or something. And then, so the problem is that we're misusing the opportunity of relationships to feed the machine of the matrix, rather than using the potential of relationships to support each other in actually aiding each other in really looking, believing in and giving support to this deeper level of awareness that each person has. And then we might not be doing the same things for each other as many people think that they're doing in community, but we would create a totally different kind of community based on that support. And we would use the energy of care, friendship, and all these really positive energies in a different kind of way.
Yeah, I feel like we're just getting started and it's already almost 8:30. There are a few more questions that I definitely want to get to, but I just wanted, if people have to sign off right at 8:30, I just wanted to first thank everybody for coming here and spending some time with us this evening. I wanted to share this Google form where if you have any suggestions for future events, future topics, future movies or albums or books that you want us to have a future event on, definitely let us know about that. And I also wanted to share, we have an open house event coming up, which kind of goes into a little bit more about the pedagogy at DRBU and dives into a little bit more about how we approach texts. So if people have to sign off now, definitely feel free to do so. And I think we'll spend just a little bit more time answering some of these questions. Sanju had a really good, I think, follow-up question to all of this, which is like, how do we know that Buddhism isn't a blue pill as well? How do we know, that it isn't just another ideology? How do we know, like what you're saying, Doug, is not just another blue pill?
Well, no, I mean, it easily could be. I think one of the really interesting things about Buddha, about the figure of the historical figure of the Buddha, is he recognized the problem of that at the very beginning, right? So at the very beginning, he was asked to say something about his experience meditating and cultivating. And he said he, had some pretty interesting experiences. He came back to talk to some people about it. He says, "Why don't you tell us about your experience?" He says, "No." He says, if I say anything, you're going to turn it into Buddhism. Whatever I say, you're going to take what I say and turn it into an ism, and you're going to miss the whole point. So I think already from the very beginning, there was a recognition on the historical Buddhist part of exactly that problem, that you could easily turn Buddhism into another way in which you got identity, or another way in which you created a kind of ideology that from you were cool to believe in or something. Or I would even say meditating to escape. You might use meditation just as another form of escape from anxiety and problems, rather than use it for actually getting to the foundation of the mind here. So the ultimate answer is, I think it's very, the problem about the Buddhist text and coming at this whole issue of practicing the insights that Buddha was trying to give us is that all of it's very personal. Every aspect of cultivation is very personal. And any realization that you're going to have that is real in it is going to be very personal. It's very difficult to share. In fact, basically the deep levels of realization are not, maybe impossible to share. So it's not something that lends itself very easily to, it doesn't lend itself very easily to a group identity, that you get the identity from holding the tenets of. I mean, you could do that, but it would kind of defeat the whole purpose of what the texts are suggesting you need to do. So I think there's a self-critical element built into it, but I don't think that all of us in the process of trying to use the techniques and ideas that the Buddha were laying out, we're not always successful, I think, in not succumbing to, in each of us, in our process, not succumbing to it becoming sometimes a crutch, or sometimes stopping or limiting stopping in some place in the process of it and kind of settling into some sort of understanding or experience that we're, and then if we stay there very long, anywhere where we're not kind of striving on, it could easily come back and be another hill, it could be another. So I think Buddhism could easily be, the insights of Buddha could easily be, for many people, used in a way that, that the blue pills use. I think it takes a lot of, I think it takes a purposeful effort to make it be the kind of red pill that forces the issue, that is always striving after looking further into the issue and never, being completely settled in having some sort of like approach that you think is, sort of the final, clear sort of, I have some kind of real understanding here that I'm applying to real. I think you have to just keep. I think I think built into the Buddhist approach is a continuous doubting and a continuous, I wouldn't say cynicism because it's not cynical. I wouldn't say critical because it doesn't have the critical mind, but an open space, an endlessly searching open space that doesn't settle easily for some content. I mean, I think that's sort of the nature of it. I wouldn't, you know, it's not, I don't even quite know what word you'd put to that, but it has an element of modernity and postmodernity in not trusting any place that you get and keeping looking further into the mind, further and further and further. And then using, as you look into that, using it, I guess, the final criteria that you would eventually use, I think, for most people would use is, after you've been practicing for a while, can you use it to actually observe the mind in the way that we've been talking about? Can you actually see eventually even see how certain outcomes come from certain choices that you make very clearly, and see the process by which you make that choice, and see where the choices that you had, and see what the impulses of where you went with these choices. And then as you are less impulsive and less bound up with certain ideologies, how that actually opens up the space to make different decisions that have different outcomes. The only way I think you can see it all is in your actual life, day to day, year to year, decade to decade, in an actual transformation of not only the interior of your processing, but also the conditions that you live in should over time be able to see over time a change as you truly do change the way that you're making decisions and the choices and so forth. And I think the only way that you can ultimately see that is in your own existence, and other people around you might be able to see that, and the people that are around you might also be able to see that change and difference in you as you become more compassionate, more patient, more. So I would look for other people's interpretation of your greater patience and compassion, and your own observation of being much more intentional and much more clear about your choices and the outcome. Those would be two really good markers to see, to see how it's going, sort of.
Yeah, I think what you're saying now might touch upon this next question from A. Wojnowski, what you're saying about the doubt. So how does one avoid tricking oneself into thinking they're seeing the true nature of the conditional and its formation when they are not?
Again, that's why I was kind of giving you those. You actually, I think the only way that you can see that you're not tricking yourself is to actually put the practice into your daily life in a way where you actually see a transformation. I think if there's not an actual transformation, I mean, when we were studying back with Master Hua, we would do these really intensive chans and sessions, sitting 20 hours a day for weeks and weeks. And the day after the chan, we were back in the middle of working a refugee program or some massive program the next day, and Master Hua, at least what I got from him, Xuan Hua, was your cultivation is only, you know how your cultivation is going in the way that you become much more efficient in actually being involved in compassionate, caring ways in the world, where you're less and less caught up in your own emotions and your own self, and more able to involve yourself in a compassionate, patient, non-attached way of interacting with other sentients in the world. So from him, I always got that how well you're doing from your action, not from your mind, from the mind itself. The mind itself is a place where you develop the skills of observation that you bring into the conditional. And the only value of it is bringing it back into the conditional in a way that's more efficient to actually make a difference for less suffering in the real world. And the the possibility of doing that, really not theoretically like helping the world, but actually doing it in some kind of way, efficiently in some kind of way that really makes a difference, you become more and more efficient in and less caught up in your own self and emotions and reactions and so forth. And the people that are actually doing that, people that are actually about real profound change and less suffering in whatever realm or way they're doing it, are part of this bodhisattva, a part of this collective bodhisattva activities. And if you want to be part of that collective bodhisattva activity of bringing the world towards a better place of less suffering, then you have to become a lot more efficient in your own process yourself. And maybe, most of the bodhisattvas running around doing great things, they maybe don't need to do so much meditation because they're maybe already very efficient. So maybe if you're already out there being totally efficient in bringing really positive, direct, skillfulness to people's conditions, then, you're probably already there in that. But many of us, speaking for myself, have a long ways to go until we're very efficient in our compassionate actions, our skillful compassion. And not just to be compassionate, but actually understand sentience well enough to actually engage people where they're at and make a difference in the actual real world of where people's at, rather than an ideological world in which you are, or projections of your own experience, but actually be in the realm of other sentience, listen carefully, be involved. Takes a lot of patience and stillness and so forth to even engage in other sentience. So it seems like there's a lot of skills there that need to be developed in cultivation that then lead to being much more effective and efficient in your actual ability to transform at whatever level that you're engaging in. So it seems like it always goes to action. I mean, in Mahayana, it's the bodhisattva. I mean, the goal is the bodhisattva, not somebody sitting meditation in emptiness. The goal is totally interacting with all sentience and bringing less suffering to all sentience in the realm they actually are in the imagined world each one is actually in. That's a pretty big project. I mean, that's a pretty big project for the person where you live with. Forget about the whole world. I mean, if you could do that with the people that you're around, if you could be more patient, more still, more understanding, more listening, more transformative and practice there, then those skills might be able to be used at a larger level in a larger sense of the world. But until you've actually been able to develop them within the realm that you already are, then the world is an escape from actually taking care of the real world that you already exist within. So a lot of people are escaping and doing good and not even taking care of their immediate karmic conditions that they already are in. I don't know if that answers the question, but I would look to that for the markers, the actual transformation of the world you live in around you to make it more patient, more compassionate, more functional, blah, 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 blah. And that would be a very good marker of transformation.
Yeah, I think that actually kind of ties into, there's a question about what is, let me see, it was from Vishnu Bhatta, what is beyond this matrix that we live in? And that kind of relates to a conversation in the chat box here between Sarah Sandbaum had a comment and also Peter Moore about, is there really escaping the matrix? Is there, Peter Moore says, so in a sense, there's no escaping conditioned things. The notion of escaping is also in some sense illusory. And he's thinking about the Heart Sutra, in which there's no attainment, no non-attainment. Yeah, maybe you can say a little bit about that.
No, I mean, that's when we were doing the conditioned, imagined, and real, the Buddha, if you're taking that kind of Yogacara three condition approach, no, there's no escaping the condition. You're not trying to escape the condition. In the Mahayana, you're not trying to escape the condition. That's not the goal. That's not the purpose. that you're what you're trying to do is see through see through how in every moment you're imagining something in coping with the real, the conditional, and that the goal of meditation and cultivation is to be able to actually see what's going on directly, moment to moment, in the totality of the condition. It's an infinitely complex. The matrix as the conditioned is an infinitely complex causal, exchange, interchange, and it's infinite in all directions. We won't get into describing it right now, but it's infinite. And so at any place that you touch it, the reason that he said, the reason the Buddha says it's empty is not because there's nothing there. The reason the Buddha said it's empty is that any place that you would actually go to touch it, the thing that you're trying to touch only exists within the conditionality of everything else that's conditioned. It doesn't exist by itself. You'll never find anything there by itself. There's no phenomena there by itself. It's there in a totally web of conditioning. And so if you went to try to find what what the condition is, you'd find it goes infinitely in all directions that you'll never find. You can never find it. So this idea of cultivation is to develop this prajna mind, this bodhi mind that is not limited by analytic, theoretical, ideology, causality from a structure of analysis, shared mathematical theorems. It's the prajna can see directly into the causality, and the primary place that operates is in every interaction with every sentience. If you can actually develop that kind of skill of listening, attending, stillness of your own mind, emptying of your own identity, ego, emotions and stuff, so you can actually experience another sentience from their experience, not from your reaction, interpretation, judgment of, then the Bodhisattva engages all sentiences, starting with the sentiences that are in the immediate world around them, and engages them actually in the reality, the imagined reality of each of those sentiences. So, and that goes out in a web infinitely too. So the degree to which you can engage that is the degree to which your cultivation, as you develop your cultivation of your meditation of that ability, then becomes the basis of your ability to expand your awareness to a larger and larger causal realm of sentient. And a Buddha is all sentient. If you could actually, you actually are a Buddha, you actually contain all sentience in your awareness. But right now, I pretty much guarantee you, none of you are probably maintaining all sentience in your current sentience. So we probably won't. We probably don't have any Buddhas here. We may, though. I'm not saying there's not a Buddha here. But does everybody see that the Buddha is just an extension of that? A Buddha is the totality, is an awareness that contains all sentience. You only contain the realm of the sentience that you have conditions with. That's the realm. That's your Buddha realm. Each one of you have a Buddha realm. The Buddha realm is as big as the sentience that you're operating. Many of you aren't even free in the sentience of your own sentience. So I would work on that first before you start engaging a lot of other sentience. But if you see the point, once you're able to do this kind of cultivation, it isn't to escape. It isn't to leave the condition. It's to engage the condition in a skillful way. That's not just becoming part of the problem by adding your desires, your fears, your identity, your emotions to it, not throwing fuel on the fire of culture, fuel on the fire of humanity with your resentment. Enough already. Chill, stop. Don't add more fuel to the fire. Bring a little stillness, a little calm, a little peaceful, a little tranquility, a lot of clarity to this whole trip, and bring a little bit of a different kind of energy to the whole, and that will penetrate, that will emanate out from your experience. So you're not escaping. You're bringing a different spirit to the whole. than the one that you're likely to get into right now, because you're so caught up in a particular view and have so many possibilities of resentments and emotions and desires and blames and feeling bad for yourself by being mistreated, and you're not loved enough, and you're lacking, and nobody really took care of you enough, and nobody really attended to you enough. Your mother never really did. And your mother really didn't do a good job, and nobody really did a good job after that. At least she should have done a good job. I mean, there's a lot you can be unhappy about.
Thanks, Doug. I think maybe we should let people go and go out there and be engaged with the world. I think we covered most of everybody's questions. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody being here this evening. I always feel very heartened knowing that there's so many people out there who are willing to spend their evenings talking about this stuff, thinking about this stuff. And I really hope, yes, please fill out the form if you have any other topics you want to hear more about in the future. We'd love to do more of this. Yeah, if people want to turn on their videos and just wave goodbye, that'd be great. It's always nice to see faces.
Bye, bye, bye.
And
Bye.
yeah, thank you everybody so much. Great to know all you guys are
Thank
here
you
for
for
this.
coming. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
thank you everybody. Woo.
Sure. Good luck.
Have a good night, everybody, or morning, wherever you guys are.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Come
night.
back for more.
Good night.
Good night.